We become a family in the airline. Every airline that I've been with, you become a very close-knit. It's a very, very small industry. And every airline, it's such a small, so you become a family and you start, so when you see that dissipate, you see that broken apart, it's very sad. You go through quite a mourning. First, you're dealing with the reality. Now you've lost your job, and now you've also lost your family, your aviation family.
Yeah.
Now it's a very difficult situation to go in.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you? Fine, and you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's so lovely to meet you here on Zoom.
Yes, you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, and congratulations again on your on finishing your check ride successfully for the Boeing.
Yes, thank you. It's a nice relief.
Tell me, was this now something that you have worked for in the past year or so? Because now with the COVID, was this sort of jeopardizing your progress that you're making?
It definitely had a factor. I was going through a retrenchment for my former airline, and so we were on the ground for 2 years, and you're not flying fit anymore. I ended off flying on the Airbus A320 on the domestic fleet, and I hadn't flown the Boeing 737. It was 4 years ago. So when I joined Safair, they've only got a Boeing 737 fleet. So it is on my license, but I had to now redo all the tests and everything again. So redo the simulator, redo all the soft courses, and then get online. You do a route check, 24 sectors. So a sector is like from Cape Town to Joburg is a sector, and you need to do 24 of those with an instructor, just to make sure you brush out all the cobwebs. And because we haven't flown for 2 years, and with COVID, you sort of lose it a little bit. You are not as sharp as you used to be, and so it takes a little bit longer to brush up, to get that skill and that polished again.
Yeah, because this is something that we don't realize, and that is that you work on that on these time frames, isn't it? You work to get your hours, and then you go to a next level almost. I don't know what the terminology is that you use, but then again, like you say, for many people that must have halted, this progression almost.
Yes, COVID has definitely hit the aviation industry. It's really affected all the pilots, and it's the second time in the history of aviation where pilots were not necessarily needed anymore. The first time was after World War II, and now it's a success, and World War II is finished, and the pilots are no longer needed. So they went from heroes to staying in the queue, trying to just get any type of job possible. And this is now the second time with COVID, where we were also the air was shut down. There were very few vaccine flights and a handful of pilots that needed to be used, and the rest of us were like, what are we going to do? When is this going to end? So it was like an indefinite delay of when are we going to go back? And then you start looking at other options, and you try and keep your license current so that when the industry comes back, you are ready to go.
Yeah. But this is something that I think also people don't think about, and this is that your careers are span over a very long time. It's not something that you just fall into and fall out of.
No.
And this is why I think it has not just an effect on the industry itself, but effect on the pilots, on the people in the industry.
Yes, absolutely. You've got it spot on. I mean, I've been flying for 23 years, and from the start to getting into an airline, like a proper fully fledged airline, it takes anything between 4 and 6 years. And it's all about hour building. So you get a logbook, and every single hour that you log, So the airlines look at you and how many hours have you got? And what type of aircraft have you got? Have you got a piston aircraft? Have you got a jet aircraft? And the bigger, the better, because then the more experienced, it shows the more experienced you are. And to build up that experience takes time. And so what's happened now as well with COVID, with an airline in the aviation industry, when you're with an airline, you start, at the bottom of the ladder and you work your way up, and your seniority. Everything's about seniority. So they don't just take somebody in and put them straight in. It's a progression before you become a captain. And when the airline shut down and it was this big pause on the industry, now guys need to start looking at other industries and other airlines if there's possibility. And what happens is your seniority, so you could have been a captain, very high seniority to your airline, you've been let go or whatever, and you go somewhere else, you start right at the bottom again, and you have to work yourself, which takes years and years and years of building up again to get back to that level that you were at. So a lot of us have lost quite a bit through this COVID.
And also that, this is, it's not a cheap training.
Yes. It's not cheap at all.
But how did you start flying? I mean, what was I want to ask now, was it something as a little girl that fascinated you? What made you go into aviation?
Actually, at the age of 14, my brother, he was the one that wanted to fly. I wanted to go into hotel management. Mm-hmm. And the one day we went to Vonneboom Airport in Pretoria, and he wanted to go up for an introduction flight, which is a great way it's a 30-minute flip just to see if you want to fly, if this is what you want to do. It gives you the feeling of this is what you want to do. And the instructor, as they were walking into the aircraft, he looks at me and says, "Come and join us." I said, "No, I'm going to have tea with my mom." No, come. So eventually I struggled behind. I sat in the back, and during the flight he made a swap and I could get control of the aircraft, and I came back and I landed and I said to Mommy, this is what I want to do. This is fantastic. And my brother, we both swapped. So I went into aviation. I love it. And he went into hotel management, and he is perfect for that.
Can you believe it?
And I've been flying. I started immediately. I went to Rand Airport, and we were like, okay, well, how do we do this? What do we do? What are the career paths? And so I started with my PPL. But as you said, it's very expensive. So my mom was a single mom. We couldn't afford it. So we went to the next option. We wanted to do it privately, but the next option is go find a sponsorship program. Mm-hmm. So I went into a sponsorship. I found it through South African Airways, and they had a cadet pilot group. So I went through the selection process, and after about 3 months, 6,500 applicants later, they chose 13 of us, and we became SA Group 16. Yeah. So they
amazing. And how many girls were in that group?
There were 4 in my group, so it was pretty impressive. They were trying to get the ladies into the groups.
Because this is also something that's really it's the same with conductors. You always assume a conductor would be a male, and it's yes. I think this is a career where we're so used to it being a male pilot, Yes. So was it in the time that you started flying? Was it already then? Look, I grew up in the 60s, so then it wasn't as common. But was it in your time when you started training? Was it quite common for girls to have this interest?
It wasn't. It was starting to get more in South Africa, especially, but it was starting to grow. Yes, I did see a massive improvement when we got to 43 Air School, which is in Port Alfred. There were a lot more girls than I expected to see there. The next group, subsequent cadet groups afterwards, kept on having more and more girls. So it was a nice transformation to see. There aren't a lot of us, to be honest. We started as an aviation in 1910, and in 2020 we've only grown. There's only 5% of airline pilots that are women in the world. There are more training out of 13% it's women that are training and becoming student pilots, but we basically about 47 years behind. So we're still playing catch up. Yeah.
But it's interesting because what I didn't realize was that with the Spitfire during the war, it was women that did the test flying in those years, and I didn't know that. But yeah, this is what their job was or their role was in that time.
Yeah. No, they were called the WASP, Women Air Service Pilots. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They only flew for about 2 years, and it was to relieve the combat pilots to go and fly the combat routes. So the women were left to fly, the courier, the courier aircraft, the cargo, and all that. So they were doing the short shuttle run. So it was lovely. They allowed the women to fly, but it was up for only 2 years, and then they stopped it. They said no. They had a lot of pressure, political pressure, to say no, women are not supposed to be in the air. So they shut down that program very quickly.
But so you said you were then in this under the sponsorship that you could train. Could you train then until you became a commercial pilot? So that
yes.
Could you then that was then sponsored for you?
Yes. So the career progression is, once you get into the sponsorship program or any sponsorship program, you start getting your 3 licenses. It's your private license, your commercial, and your airline license. So your private license, you need 45 hours, and that's the basics. That's the start of it. Then you get your commercial pilot license, your CPL, which is about 200 hours, and then your airline license is 1,500 hours. So there's a big gap between your 200 and your airline. So they sent us for 2 years, 18 months at 43 Air School to build up to CPL level, your commercial level. We left there with 250 hours. We did a few extra aerobatic training, and we did a King Air simulator conversion. And then as a cadet group, they said we must go to call it a feeder airline. So it's a small step before you go. It's like an internship before you get into South African Airways. So that was either SA Airlink or SA Express or Medicross. Those were the 3 options. You go for the interview. If you pass it, then you get selected. And I did about 4.5 years at Airlink. And then after that, I went and I got the call from SA. I said, listen, you're ready. You've got your hours. I left there with almost, I think it was about 1,800 hours. I had got my airline license. Now I'm ready to go into SA.
Okay. And then, but are you still with SAA? Because
no, unfortunately, I was retrenched. That's why I was on the ground for the last year at Business Rescue. Unfortunately, have been flying now, and I got my job with Safair, which is a low-cost airline here in South Africa, and I'm flying the Boeing 737. So I'm very, very happy. Cape Town base, and it's a lovely, lovely company. It's nice to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I spoke to Rian van Zyl a few days ago, who is with Airlink, and he's also based in Cape Town. Very happy there.
Very. I don't want to leave. A lot of guys are going overseas, and I wish them all the best. But I really love South Africa. I want to stay here. So I was very, very blessed to get a position at Safair. They're expanding exponentially, so they need quite a few more pilots. So it's good.
Oh, I see. Okay. But now, what do you think if somebody wants to go into the aviation industry? What would you say? What should be the key sort of characteristics or thing that you have to have that you from your perspective?
Well, firstly, there's a lot of jobs in the aviation industry. So the first question to me, to that person, would be, what particularly what do you want to do in aviation? There are so many positions, not just a pilot. There's not just cabin crew. We're talking about there's engineers, there's flight dispatchers, there's air traffic controllers, there's schedulers, there's business managers that are running a show, maintenance technicians, aircraft refuelers. So my first question would be, well, what do you want to, which position you want to do? And then look at and Google as much as you can, or get a mentor, what is the career path for that airline? The characteristics will then depend on that specific role. But in general, aviation, we always call it, it's a bug. Once you're in it, it bites you, and you're in it for life. A lot of us that are in it, we normally stay in it for the rest of life. It's just a different environment. You have to be very open-minded, willing to be very time conscious, very, what you call in Afrikaans, pro-right, very friendly, and also be very set. We study a lot. We go through a lot of tests. You have to be willing to be on your toes, get tested every 6 months, and be good with people. I mean, this is a people industry. We work with passengers every single day, and you need to be open to traveling a lot. It's very exciting. I mean, it's a good career to get involved in.
But it's not your. It's for a woman. Is it? Do you think it's more demanding in a sense if you have a family and that side of things? You know, we always have to think of that as well.
Yes, absolutely. Our challenges are quite big. A lot of us, we do have a lot of women have families, so it is. I'm just generalizing here. It's not for everybody, but a lot of the women in the industry choose the domestic flying. What that helps you with is to you sign on in the morning and you'll be finished in the afternoon. At least you'll be home with the kids or with the family, or if you've got responsibilities at home, you can still run a home quite easily. This becomes challenging when you do long haul flying or international flights, and you're away for a couple of days. You really need a good family support structure at home. So you'll see a lot of the ladies, they'll be mostly on the domestic routes just to balance family life. And that's one of the biggest challenges we've got. A lot of the guys have got discrimination issues, and that there's not a lot of policies, terms and conditions to our employment needs to be looked at. So a lot of ladies are also battling with cultural diversity in different airlines. A lot of airlines don't allow women still up until today. Yeah. So there aren't a lot of airlines that allow. Yes, it is. It's quite. So there's some airlines I'm not allowed to apply for because I'm a lady, and that's just one of those things that's why we're still quite behind in getting our numbers up.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. But is there discrimination? Do you have that sense of discrimination where you are now, or in South Africa? Do you think it's more acceptable in the industry itself?
In South Africa, we've transformed from 1994. That was when we were allowed to get into the airline. And up until now, 2020, we haven't been discriminated. I feel that the top 3 airlines in the world, or South Africa is the top 3. We've got, I think it's India, Ireland, and South Africa is the top female pilots in the world, which has got more than 5% of females in that. I have heard I'm on the FALPA, a Women Female Pilots Working Association group. It's a global female pilots association, and we're dealing with a lot of issues around the world. And I can see that the ladies outside of the industry, outside of South Africa, are battling a lot more than what we are. We have really improved it a lot. I don't have any issues at Safair. I never had issues at South African Airways. I flew with amazing gentlemen. They were very, very nice to me, and I had a really good company culture. But there has been a lot of reports from other that there's masculinity issues. The ladies are trying to fit in. The guys are taking advantage and saying, "Oh, well, you're just a woman," or they're just treating them like one of the guys, and you're just expected to get on with it. There's a lot of issues and challenges as being a female in this industry.
Yeah, and your uniforms are they? Because I'm asking just because I'm a girl.
No, it's fun.
I ask the female conductors as well. What is the, if it has that feminine, also that feminine sort of aspect to it? Because I mean, you don't want to wear a man's uniform.
They have tailored the jacket a little bit, so you've got a little bit of a waist. It's not the stock standard airline jacket. We still have to wear a tie. Some airlines, which is nice, they've got a little ip, and we don't wear hats. It's just it's not seen in aviation for the ladies to wear hats. So that's unfortunate because I want to wear hats, but the guys always say, no, it's like a flying frisbee. You always leave it everywhere. Some airlines you can choose, which was a nice thing at South African Airways. You can actually choose if you want to wear a skirt with stockings. But difficult like that, you are in an aircraft, so it is a bit tricky to get in and out the aircraft with, in the cockpit. In a Boeing, the cockpit is quite small, so if you have a skirt on, you have to stretch over it. It becomes a bit logistically a bit of a challenge. So a lot of us have just said, you know what, I'll go with the pants, and it just makes more sense. But you will see the ladies on the long haul, they'll wear nice skirt, long with stockings, and they look stunning.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Something else that I spoke to Rian van Zyl about also is this transition, and this, especially now in this time with the COVID and some people were sort of asked to go on early pension, and I think many have lost their jobs. Is this something that you think about also, or have at the back of your mind? What if I wouldn't be able to fly?
That was my first reaction when we were going through all this. This is my skill. This is my craft. A lot of guys were fortunate enough to start businesses through SAA, but through a long time. And other people in other airlines, I never had anything to fall back on. I never had a degree, and this is it. This is all I do. So you start Googling everything to become, from becoming an electrician to a plumber to, I haven't thought about becoming an estate agent or opening up a laundromat. You look at all available options because the industry, you thought maybe a month or two. Obviously, COVID, wasn't 6 months, it wasn't 1 year. We're still having an effects of COVID and the impact of it. I looked at studying, and I was like, well, maybe if I get a degree. So I looked on, and I was very fortunate to do my MBA in operations and project management through this 14 months that I was on the ground. And I was so grateful that at least I've got a degree, I've got something. I got some really good interviews during and afterwards. Thankfully, Safair called before I got out of the industry. But a lot of us and a lot of my colleagues and former colleagues are either they were very close to retirement, so they've retired early. We've lost maybe 5 years of guys that could have flown for another 5 or 10 years, and they've just said, I'm not going to bother. We have to do quite a lot of tests. They're not going to come back and redo all their tests. It's a lot of work. It's very stressful. You're away from home. I'm just going to get out of it and take early retirement. So we've lost those guys. A lot of guys have gone under a lot of stress. We've really lost a few colleagues due to stress and medical issues. And they've lost their medical licenses, so now they can't fly anymore. A lot of guys just don't want to come back. They said, you know what, I'm going to look for something else. I'm either going to go into another career path, or I'm going to open my own business. Or thirdly, what I did, I tried to study. So that's like the other option as well. And then you're playing for time, and we've all diverted in these different paths, and everyone is taken. So we've lost a lot of pilots. We're not seeing it as much in South Africa, but globally there's a pilot shortage coming, especially now because a lot of pilots, even globally, have taken these different directions, and there's a huge shortage coming.
But this is, I think it's so important that we realize this, because I think we get on the plane and we get to the other side, and we focused on getting there and the plane and the tickets, and getting cheap tickets and getting to, but there's so much behind that we don't realize. And if you're talking about shortages now, and also the industry have taken a financial hit as well. There are people not just on holiday, but there are people doing business over the world, and it's so important. I mean, we really, I think we've taken this for granted, just getting onto a plane.
Yes.
Yeah.
The skills shortage, and because of COVID, and as you said earlier, it's very expensive. I mean, there are three options you can get into the aviation. You can do it privately, which is you can pay for it yourself, but it costs a small fortune. It takes very long. Secondly, you can go through the Air Force but that takes a while, or you get a sponsorship program. So those are your only three options for training. So a lot of people have looked at it. A lot of the cadet sponsorship programs have obviously dwindled with COVID. They're not open anymore. They're slowly coming back in, but they're not, obviously the company said, well, we're not going to start that yet. Let's just look after our own crew at the moment. And because everyone has halted that training, the Air Force has halted intakes, you're not getting that steady pilots coming through the system, which takes years to build up to airlines. So I read the statistics the other day. By 2037, there's going to be a shortage of, I think it was, I had to look it up, I think it's 790,000 pilots that are going to be short.
What?
That's almost 30,000 in Africa alone. I had to quickly just look. That's a lot of people. And 2037 is around the corner. That's less than just over 15 years away. And we're looking at about 800,000 pilots that are needed.
And this is not something that, like you say now, it's not something that happens instantly. It's not something that you train somebody in 3 years and suddenly they are, equipped to do a good job. It's all these years of building up, and you actually you only achieve that later on in your life. That goal that you have to become a commander or a captain, and it's not something that you just instantly have.
No.
Yeah.
No, it takes a long time. And SAA, when I joined, they were forecasting for me as a co-pilot to become a captain was anything between 10 and 12 years. As the airline expands, it will become quicker. Well, by the time I ended it was ending up at about 20 years because there was an expansion. But every airline is different. Safair says in 5 years I'll become a captain. Other airlines are 2 years. So it doesn't happen overnight. When you see the guy, the captain on the left-hand seat, he deserves to be there. He has gone through the ranks. He started at the bottom, and it takes anything between 2 and 20 years to become a commander, and that takes time to build up. And when you go to another airline, you have to start right at the bottom and work your way up again.
Yeah, well, this is so admirable what you're doing, and that you're so dedicated to it. Yeah, I think it's something that I've noticed also by speaking to pilots that they so dedicated. And what I found so interesting was when I did the project over lockdown here in Vienna, and I photographed artists in their windows, and I actually photographed a few young pilots in their windows, and that pride, that they all had their little model planes out, and it was so exciting, and that made me really. This is why I think I really noticed that aviation is really, it's the same almost for me, the same as when you speak to a musician, it's also something that happened since they were a young age, and it's where they got this idea from, and where it's like a passion that grows inside them, and then they dedicate their lives to it. And I think in aviation you get that as well. And even I think, like you say, in all the aspects of aviation, you get, even I think on the ground when there are engineers that are very passionate about what they are doing.
Yes, absolutely. finding that even, from the baggage handler to the ramp agent, to the check-in staff, to the dispatcher, to the flight controller, everyone wants to be there. It's not just a job for us. We love it. You have tough days, but the better days, the minute you take off, you see that aircraft go, you see the clouds. It just does something to your psyche. We love going to work. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I think it must be something magical about flying. The whole association.
Yeah.
That's why you say even the baggage handlers there are, because when you get at the airport, automatically it's that excitement, even for passengers. This idea I'm flying. Yeah.
Yeah. And illustration to share with you, which Southwest Airlines actually used. The whole on-time performance was taken from the F1 pit crew. So if you know Formula One and the pit crew, and when the car comes in, everybody just does their bit and it goes out. So Southwest Airlines sent for 3 months, and they went to go and observe the pit crew, and just to observe how does it work? How can they push that aircraft back the way if F1 team gets the Ferrari or the car to go? And that whole philosophy has now come into the airline to go on time performance. And so you'll see when an aircraft comes in, it's not just us, it's not just a cabin crew, it's a pit crew of factors getting you on the aircraft in time. And it's like an art form. Everyone does their thing. The refueler comes in time, you give them figures, the passengers are boarding, the cleaner's already waiting at the back, and it's this orchestra of everybody working as a team to get that aircraft turned around on time, pushed back, and then everyone's like, there we go, we push them back in time.
Amazing. I'm glad you called it an orchestra, because because it's what it is. Everybody plays their part. Yeah. Exactly. Amazing. Yeah. But Jan, tell me now, what are your wishes for the future still?
Well, I'm very grateful to be in Safair, and I'm going to hopefully get my command upgrade very soon, within the next 5 years. With the Safair expanding, hopefully it might be even sooner. With my MBA that I've just recently graduated in December, I'd really like to get involved with some projects in Safair, so that I don't let that degree, I'd like to get it working, in operations and project management. With all the new routes that they are going to expand with, I can at least then start looking at that. And I'd love to just get involved in management. There aren't a lot of women in management roles in airlines itself. So it would be nice to get involved in management, get involved in still fly, but use both skills in the airline, and stay in South Africa. I really hope that I can just stay here and enjoy being in South Africa and flying for South African airline, for Safair.
Yeah, it's a wonderful privilege to be able to be there and have a job that you enjoy, and not have to go to outside, like you say. Some people were kind of forced to leave.
Yes.
But,
because especially for us, if there aren't a lot of pilot roles, like there are only a certain amount of airlines in South Africa. So if the jobs are full, they're full. So you as a pilot, you have no other option to then look abroad, look regional, look at international, to try and keep a license going and fly. And then you just commute up and down.
And because I heard Comair is also stopped.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, they've gone through a huge liquidation. Many employees were left stranded. So a lot of the airlines here are trying to absorb some of the pilots, but there's only a certain amount of pilots and employees that you can take. So the rest of them are, again, whichever route they're going, and they need to now decide which path they're going to take.
And as you mentioned before, it's not just the pilot, and it's it's all the ground crew, and they all that. It's like the same in the theater, that we see the performers on stage, but it's behind the scenes. It's the makeup artists, it's the costume designers, it's the guys.
Absolutely.
So it's when something like that happens, it's not just the pilots that are affected. It's the whole team.
It's a whole family. We become a family in the airline. Every airline that I've been with, you become a very close knit. It's a very, very small industry, and every airline, it's such a small. So you become a family, and you start. So when you see that dissipate, you see that broken apart. It's very sad. You go through quite a mourning. First, you're dealing with the reality. Now you've lost your job. And now you've also lost your family, your aviation family.
Yeah.
Now it's a very difficult situation to go in. I'm very, very fortunate. I've gone into an airline. It felt like I've joined another family. They were so welcoming. And it was like, oh, thank goodness. So I've got a job and I got my family back.
Yeah.
A lot of other guys are not getting that as yet. They might not get it if they decide to go another path. So they've lost two very important loves in their life, and it's very, very hard.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. But Joanne, tell me, I just have one last question for you. Can you do a shout out for your favorite coffee shop or restaurant in Cape Town?
There are so many. All right, I will do. There's a shout out from myself, Joanne Jordan, to Melkbos Kitchen. Love their restaurant, and remember to book beforehand because it is that full and that unique and that special. On the rocks, it's just it's a great place to go to.
So it's in Melkbos Strand, I assume.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really special.
Okay. I'll pop in there when I come back. I'll come to South Africa again. Yeah, it's such a beautiful.
I'll take it.
It's such a beautiful. Melkbos Strand is such a beautiful place, and yeah.
That's stunning.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for this, and such a lovely, insightful interview. And I wish you all the best for the future also, and that all your wishes come true.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And thank you for this opportunity to share our story, because not a lot of people understand what we're going through and what the industry is, what a big knock we've taken. So I appreciate this. Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure. And I hope to see you in South Africa soon.
That'd be lovely. Definitely. That'll be awesome. Thank you.
See you. Bye.